With 351 riders starting, but only 16 making it to the top of Mount Olympos, this is the toughest sea to sky race yet. In this episode, you will find out everything that went down from the sea to the sky. Brought to you by the World Hard Enduro Podcast.
Damn.
All right, so we are back for the post-race episode of the 6th and penultimate round of the FIM Hard Enduro World Championship C2 Sky. What a race, guys.
Yeah, what a race. You can't say that enough. It was an absolute thriller, very diverse as well over the 3 days. And I think as well, something I noticed is that the coverage for this race, there were so many different media platforms putting out content every single day. And it just looked like it was a hard enduro race on steroids.
Yeah, I agree. It was so cool to watch this race. What a beautiful place. And how cool was it to have such different terrain for the riders to tackle over those 3 days. I think that this definitely was and I feel like we say this every time, but it was definitely a unique race in the championship.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you touched on a really good point there that we don't actually normally touch on, but just how beautiful was that location, right? It was a holiday destination. We saw many of the riders going for like awesome swims. There were yacht parties going on. It was just such a cool venue, besides the race itself, which also was just so amazing.
Yeah, the views and the Instagram stories, it made me so jealous. I just wanted to be there, honestly.
Yeah, even the riding locations, like when they were riding through that canyon with a river where they built the bridge over it.
Yes.
Like what an epic venue to just go and swim at, like jump off a rock into a pond. Then you have the beach where they're racing along the shoreline. I see now what you mean about it not being a beach that we know. But still, there were some sandy sections, right? I was expecting, in my mind, I had more of like a solid rock kind of beach, but absolutely beautiful facility, beautiful country. I think we definitely need to go there next year, or at least try to. That'll definitely be on our bucket list. And maybe while I'm there, get a hair transplant as well. I think it's also going to be needed by then.
Apparently, it's a good place.
It is. So I've heard.
I think also this race, as we know, it's the riders' favorite, right? So we bring out so many different types of riders from all over the world. A lot of South Africans coming to this race. Very easy and accessible for them as well. As we know, having a green passport isn't the easiest passport. So I think that, it's easy race for everyone to get to. And we see it actually within the first day, which is the beach race. The beach race begins with a qualifying round, which is not for the FIM Hard Enduro World Championship riders, but for these races now that are coming from all over the world that are not necessarily entered into the championship, and they enter this qualifying race, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think that there were some noteworthy riders in that beach qualifying race, especially within your top 10. These are some riders that we know from previous races, from, riding history. So we have Sonny Gogia, who came in first in that beach qualifying race. James Moore came in second. We have Kyle Flanagan coming in fourth. Dieter Rudolph, the ex-grip rider, coming in sixth, as well as Dylan Jones, the young South African, coming in eighth. And we also have Rigo Ryoko coming in ninth. So definitely some riders who aren't in, as you said, the Hard Enduro World Championship FIM class, but definitely noteworthy finishes for that qualifying race.
That's such a good point, because looking through the name lists of, say, the top 20 or whatever it was, there were a lot more names that I recognized than previous races. I think, again, the Sapphists came out in full force. It was so cool to see so many guys that we know from back home who don't race the Hard Enduro World Championship but came to this race. And all along the side of the track, you often saw South African flags. And something that I thought was really cool was the Rigo racing team was basically all South Africans,
yes.
Right? Italian team, but full of South Africans, just supporting them, coming over and helping them race this immaculate race.
It all actually began with Kyle Flanagan on that team racing the Super Enduro World Championship, the junior class for Rigo, and then that's how they got in touch with Matthew, then James Moore. So it just seems to be a floodgate, an open floodgate to Europe for South African champions. And also very noteworthy, James Moore just wrapped up the South African Championship title, so he's now he's a champion, a South African champion. So for sure, Rigo Racing is going to be interested in maybe bringing him on for a championship season. He's showed interest in it. He said that he's looking for places to stay in Europe, where he would love to move over and basically do what Matt's doing.
I think that is so cool, and I think the team really deserves a shout out, because for South Africans, it's really hard to actually make the move to Europe. There's not a lot of opportunities and not a lot of teams. I know in the MXGP side of things, you often have to pay into a team, buy into a team. I don't know if it's the same with Hard Enduro, but I think big shout out to them for, extending the arm and helping these South African riders, because there are really good talents over there. And awesome job to Rigo Racing.
Yeah, and what we've heard, if you go back to our Matthew Green interview, which we did at the beginning of the season, he makes it pretty clear also that there's no expense spared for parts, for training, for everything that goes into that team. So, they're putting a lot of money and a lot of effort to develop their bikes. They're still on the 23 bikes, so they're still on the old chassis and the old motor, but they found such a good tune, such a good setting on those bikes where they actually just said, let's run that, keep on running that until, we've done enough testing for the 24 bike. So again, that side, you don't see that very often, and it's super cool. It's the best way to get these juniors going.
And I think, these are the teams that actually make the championship. You have your factory teams, right? But these non-factory, I guess you would call it a satellite team, or somewhat of a satellite team. They're the ones that really hold the championship together. They're putting money in from their own expenses and their own wallet. They're forking out because of a passion for the sport, right? And I think sometimes they don't get enough credit. So to all those teams, obviously there's more than just Rigo Racing. Big shout out and hats off for everything that you do for the sport.
Yep. Sorry, Bro Racing as well. Mario Roman. We've got Alfredo Gomez with his AG racing team with juniors on them. So
also the X-Grip boys.
X-Grip boys as well with Valentina Hutter. It's so cool to see, and it's exactly what we need.
So just to be clear, this wasn't actually a junior race for the FIM, but yes, I do 100% agree. It is amazing to see these teams supporting juniors out of their own pocket.
Yeah.
So moving into more details about this first race day, this beach race. So obviously you had your beach qualifying, which was just for non-FIM riders. Then you had your heats, quarterfinals, semifinals, and then your finals, or super finals, I guess you could call it. Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about what this track looked like on the beach?
Yeah, flat out, just
tapped, boy.
Tapped. It was just a flat out track. These guys were absolutely sending it. There was a few singles there that the guys weren't even tapping off on, just sending it as deep as they could go. The track. What I did notice though in the first couple of heats, those logs looked like they were greased. I swear the organizers went there with a bottle of some old 4-stroke and just greased these logs, man. Because Graham Jarvis, even he tried to go on the center log, so in true Jarvis style, tries to avoid the obstacle and just take the high line over the top, which is obviously takes a lot of balance and skill, which he definitely can do, and he showed it many times. And as soon as he got on it, it just slipped off, and he struggled there, had a little bit of a wheel spin to try to get going. Kirsten Landman, I saw also washed out, just front wheel hitting at a bit of an angle, and front wheel just lost out. So it really looked like they greased up those logs in the early stages, but by the time the races went through, the dust, the sand covered these logs, took that grease away or whatever it was. It could have just been moisture from the logs, after putting it down and constructing it. So track looked really fast, really interesting, very interesting.
So let's speak a little bit about the actual results, your top 10. So these final results also do now obviously include the Hard Enduro Championship riders. So we have Billy Bolt in first, Manuel Lettenbichler in second, Wade Young in third, Mitch Brightmore in fourth, Theodore Kabachev in fifth, Mario Roman sixth, Sonny Gogia seventh, Alfredo Gomez eighth, Graham Jarvis in ninth, and Matthew Green in 10th.
Two big surprises there for me. Obviously, number one, comes out swinging, needs to prove a point, needs to prove that he is back. Billy Bolt comes out and just takes the W inside the beach race. Doesn't count for points, but definitely does count for clout.
Yes, for clout and for cool points, right?
Cool points, yeah.
And I think, he came out absolutely swinging. I don't know if he regularly rides like that, but he was on absolute rails. There was no one that was going to touch him. And I personally loved the track because it resembles kind of a motocross track. And to see him rail those corners and absolutely send those ski jumps, I was well impressed with his performance. I wasn't surprised, but for him to win it, I was surprised. But yeah, a lot of clout points for him. Second
notable there is Graham Jarvis coming in the top 10, already starting to show something, some flair, some fire of what he's got for Sea to Sky. He's not necessarily known as the fast rider. He's not necessarily known as the guy that's going to go out there and just absolutely send it. He's had to work on that, throughout the years with Wade coming through, with Manny coming through, Billy, all of these riders, these young guns. And for him to be in the top 10 in the beach race is pretty noteworthy for me.
Yeah, absolutely exceptional performance. I think that when we look at the podium, I think of the finish, and it was just setting up for an absolutely exceptional day 2 and day 3, right? We had Manny, Wade, and Billy all on the podium. The championship battle was right there, and then Billy throwing a spanner in the works. It was setting up for absolutely phenomenal day 2 and day 3.
Yeah.
I think another noteworthy is Mitch Brightmore coming in fourth, having a solid, qualifying day, as well as Alfredo Gomez coming in eighth, coming in top 10. Recently or previously in the season, he hasn't necessarily had the best finishes, the best races, but I think coming in eighth in that qualifying is a really good result for him.
Yeah. One thing that I would also like to note is TTR Quadricourse as being one of those junior teams.
Yes.
Because they are definitely right up there. We forgot to mention them a little bit earlier. But yeah, I think Rigo
Racing.
Keep on messing that up. I think that Rigo Racing, maybe you can say that.
And now that you mentioned Mitch, that actually makes me think of his team, TTR Quadricourse. They are one of those teams similar to Rigo Racing, right? That help bring those juniors up, because Ashton is still a junior, Mitch is still a junior. Okay, Mitch rides both classes, but they're one of those teams that are bringing young talent up and supporting them and giving them an opportunity to display their talents in this elite championship, right?
Yeah, how can we forget that team? Definitely at the same level as Rigo Racing.
Also powered by Plus, which is also doing phenomenal work in this championship and just in the off-road motorcycle world in general, right? They have popped up and really, really supported and shown that they are here to stay, and awesome work from Plus.
Yeah, definitely. So that pretty much concludes the beach race. Very important to note now that this beach race does not count towards any FIM Hard Enduro World Championship points. So this is just purely for starting position for the next day, which is the Forest Day, and that is when we'll start seeing points being awarded.
So we are heading now into day 2, which is the forest race. It's about a 45-kilometer forest route through the forest trails of the area. And this was expected to be pretty demanding. They had about a 4-hour finish time for this day, but it actually ended up being a lot faster than anyone had expected. Our top riders finished it within 2 hours. So this day definitely didn't come out the way anyone really was anticipating.
And to put that into perspective, the organizers set a 4-hour cutoff for the final checkpoint. So these guys were doing it in half the amount of time. So that shows you the pace that they were going at. But some stories that we've heard from this race, from our current points leader actually in the championship, Manny, he had quite a fast crash. It wasn't bad, it wasn't too serious, but from what we saw from social media, he hurt his hand and his ankle and his foot, and he was icing it after the day. And that's not how you want to start off your Sea to Sky race. You know, this is the first time we get see points come into, so he got a total of 2 points because he came in second. But not the way that you want to get going on that Forest Day.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think that they definitely try to keep it under wraps. But as things happen now with social media, you know, stories start swirling about, and I can understand them trying to keep it under wraps. You see that a lot in the motocross side of things. You never want to give your competition any bit of advantage or any bit of idea that you're weaker. So I completely understand it, but unfortunately, you know, people talk, and yeah, it did look a little bit more serious than they let on. But still, for him to not only just finish day 2, but the whole event, because it looked pretty painful in the end.
Yeah, I think that their social media team didn't get the memo, though, to keep it under wraps, because, I mean, yeah, it was a full reel on Instagram of it, you know, and him discussing and talking about it. So I think for him personally, he was probably like, I wish we could just, you know, fluff this over and then move on. And then
was that at the end of day 2 or day 3?
End of day 2 or beginning of day 3.
I must have missed that, actually.
Yeah,
I didn't see that.
KTM Factory Racing had a reel about him talking about it and him icing it and everything. So
Definitely uncharacteristic of him to have a crash, though. I mean, how often have you heard of Manny having a crash or falling or having a bit of a tumble? It's not really something that we hear of. I mean, obviously, yes, he had his knee injury, but that was kind of a freak accident, I would say. But him crashing, you know, I don't know. I just feel like that's not something that he normally does.
The key is in the adjective. So, fast crash.
That's true.
Manny is definitely a fast rider. Don't get me wrong, but he is the king of not making mistakes in the slow stuff, in the tech stuff.
True.
When things start getting a bit faster, which we don't see very often inside the hard enduro world championship, right? Where the riders have to go flat out in very dangerous sections. I think that's the situation that we see.
I think something that maybe is a little off topic, but I think the one race that he didn't go to, which was the X-Ross race, that was technical but fast. And that race, obviously, Wade came in first in that one. It would have been really interesting to see how Manny and Wade would have competed in that specific race, especially with Wade coming from the South African, you know, off-road experience. You know, South Africans, they love to go fast. So I think that would have been a super interesting race to see Manny compete in. But we're at Sea to Sky, we're at round 6, so let's keep going. Do you have any other stories from day 2, the Forest race?
That was a good point, by the way. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Another story, Wade Young coming out swinging, taking the Forest Day win. Yeah, as you said, this, like, what Wade has grown up racing is so different to what Manny, Jarvis, Billy, all these guys were racing. We raced the Junior National Championship. We had an Enduro Championship as well as Off-Road Championship, and it's pretty fast. It's pretty fast going, and yeah, he proved it inside this Forest Day where things got a bit faster.
Yeah, and I think it also just spiced it up a little to see Wade come out on top, right? Because then you see him start at or finish the first day in third, but then lead the second day passing both. Okay, Manny did have his crash, but finishing the second day on top, it's you get, like, for me at least, I was thinking, yeah, we go, he's got this, he's gonna do it. And I just think it added that much more excitement, and I just wanted to follow what was going to happen on the next day, because and to go on your point with South African enduro racing, I raced an off-road once with you, and that was absolutely pinned, fifth gear, valve bouncing, tapped, boy. Yeah. And that's what we do there, right?
Yeah,
I don't know if it's like that in other countries. I've never raced off-road or enduro in other countries, but yeah, that's a very I think because of the farmlands, right?
Yeah.
In the farmlands, there's just so many dirt roads, so many long stretches. You have to go around farms, and the only way to get around is to go tapped down the side of it.
Yeah, and things have changed now recently. So there's junior classes and now a hard enduro championship, a separate championship for hard enduro in South Africa, where previously it was just an enduro championship where it followed a classic style enduro racing, so special tests and things like that. Then for the juniors, we would have to race in the junior nationals, which was off-road racing. I mean, to put it in perspective, quads were racing the same track that we were. So then like there's no real super tough sections inside those races. So yeah, that definitely came through.
And that's such an interesting point that like I almost forget how young hard enduro is, right? Because us growing up, it was not ever a thing. It was never a term that was used. It was never something that either of us did. Okay, I didn't race enduro, but it's nothing that I ever heard of. And I think the sport is so young, and I think that what these guys do is so underrated. Like it's exciting to be at the beginning, but I don't think that the riders get enough credit because it is extremely tough. It is so challenging, and I think mainly mentally, right?
Yeah.
Because you're out there for so long, and okay, if it's just long straights, cool, like you're pwned and that, but you're being challenged physically and mentally for hours out there, and you're not even moving majority of the time, right? You're covering, like, at one point I tuned into the live timing and it showed that they were going like 5 kilometers per an hour, which I think is actually quick, right?
Yeah, I think that's a quick section.
yeah. So it's so interesting to see like how these riders are doing this without having come up racing hard enduro, which makes me think, how interesting will the next generation be, the guys that are now starting out actually training for hard enduro, and what are they going to be like when they come to the big leagues?
Yeah, for sure.
I want to go into our final or our official finishes, our top 10 finishes for this day 2 of the Forest Race. So these are your top 10. Of course, as we mentioned, in first we have Wade Young. About 3 minutes later, in second, we have Manny. Then we have Billy. We have Theodore, David Cyprian, Graham Jarvis, Vaclav Nedved, Alfredo Gomez, Francis Moret, and then finishing in 10th, Thomas Scales. And I think this actually speaks volumes to what you just said, Chris, which is that young generation, which is exactly who Thomas is. He is that young and upcoming generation from South Africa who is now, top 10 on this Forest Day. I definitely think that, this is an exact example of that. The young generation who is learning and participating in hard enduro races from, their youth. They're definitely going to be ones to give the older bunch in a couple of years a bit of a battle.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And just looking at the times from the Forest Race, Wade Young took a clean win across the board, across 9 sections. So he was fastest out of every section on that Forest Day.
So every single checkpoint,
Yes.
is that what you call it?
Yes.
He was the quickest.
Correct.
But he couldn't have been that much quicker, because to win in the overall by 3 minutes, and with Manny's crash, it must have been close, but still phenomenal, right?
Green across the board
Seconds.
from 1 to 9.
But definitely seconds between him and Manny.
Yeah.
One more point that I want to make, and this is someone who we don't see in the top 10, is Mario. So he actually had a mechanical issue on this day and only ended up being in the second row for that final day. So this initially already puts him at a bit of a back step heading into day 3, the final day, which puts us into day 3, which is our main race day. Now, just to give you an idea, we had 351 participants start on the final day of the 2024 C2 SCA, but with only 16 finishers making it across the final Red Bull Arch of Mount Olympos. This ended up being a much tougher race than anyone had expected. Arguably the toughest C2 SCA race yet.
I think that is an understatement. From what I saw, the scenes I saw at the finish line, the scenes I saw on track, the comments afterwards from interviews, I think it took a lot of guys by surprise and a lot out of the guys. Guys looked absolutely exhausted. We had Billy basically passed out on the floor at the end. You had Manny could hardly even speak. Okay, he was nursing that injury, but I think, and I'm not too sure which rider it was, but someone was saying it's the longest and hardest day they've had on their bike in a long time.
Yeah, you can definitely see it from the scenes, right? When the top riders are that exhausted at the finish line where there's just nothing left in the tank, you know that they have been absolutely scrumming out there in the mountains. And I think you made a really good point, Chris, by saying that it was unexpected.
Yes.
They knew that it was going to be more difficult because the organizers said from previous years,
That's true.
Mark Skinner's the track director. He's setting track, making sure everything's right for the race. And for sure, he's friends with everyone, telling, hey, guys, this is going to be a tougher one. But they were probably how much more tougher could it be, right?
A lot more.
And I also think probably after day 2, where, they were expected to do it in 4 hours, did it in 2 hours, I think that as well caught the guys off guard, right? Because then you're thinking, okay, so then surely the next day cannot be that much tougher, that if the second day was a lot easier than they said it would be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just to give our listeners a general understanding of how the day kind of played out. So we were on top of social media, but also that live timing. And it seemed like there were constant changes in the race leader throughout the day. I remember sitting on the couch watching this live timing, and every time there would be a new leader, someone would announce it in the house. And all of a sudden, we're back on live timing. We're back to see who's in the new lead. So it really was a very interesting race in terms of having someone different lead it throughout the race. And again, this is also not something that we usually see. Normally, Manny is in the lead and he keeps the lead. But this race was not the same. This race was different. There were a lot of challenging between those top riders throughout that final day.
And we see it inside the times, right?
Oh, yes.
So we've got 12 sections, 12 checkpoints inside this race. There were 5 different winners for the 12 checkpoints. So that means that there were 5 different guys pushing in different sections of these races to get into the top. And that's what you see, the jostling for that top position and just for battles throughout the race. I think that is some good racing. Oh, my goodness. That's really cool.
So in the beginning, we start off and Manny takes the whole shot. Right, and he heads straight into that canyon riverbed section, and you're looking at your top 5 being Manny in first, Theodore in second, Wade in third, Billy in fourth, and Mario in fifth. This is kind of where there's a lot of competition pretty early in this, race. Then after that, they start heading up to the top of Mount Olympos, and Mario is right on Manny's heels. But then right behind him is Wade and Theodore. So you have, again, a little bit of a change up in now your top 4. Then after that, we head into a section called the Dark Canyon section, and Mario strikes a rock and absolutely destroys his header pipe. I mean, if anyone has been seeing anything on social media, you will see how horrid that header pipe looks by the time Mario gets to the finish line. And this specific point in the race allows for Manny to pull away into that number 1 spot. And Brandon, as you said, the results of these checkpoints are just all over.
I think that, it was such a thrilling day. I remember us sitting here, and I think Mario's pipe, an understatement would be that it was dismantled because the header was not even connected. Yeah. So he might as well have been riding without a pipe. And that comes back to your point of him actually starting on the second grid of day 3.
Yes.
So he came through to the podium with a dinged up pipe from the back. I think that ride needs to be acknowledged, and we need to shout him out. Mario, absolutely phenomenal ride for overcoming those challenges that were thrown at you and putting it on the box.
He was tied with Manny with a number of sections 1 in this race. So 4 sections 1 each between Manny and Mario. So throughout the day, they were the 2 top guys, basically fighting for time, fighting for position. And that was really cool to see.
And I think that as well, Mario is renowned for loving the tough, difficult, long days, right? And what was the final gap between them? I don't think it was that much.
13 between
minutes.
Manny
So
and Mario.
I think maybe an hour or two more, and he probably would have had Manny. I don't want to say that.
I don't even think so. I think that if Mario's header pipe hadn't been destroyed by this accident, and he said he's never done this in his life before, this kind of thing has never happened to him, and I think he's a little bit, frustrated and potentially a little bit embarrassed by how this ended up happening, but I believe that when we get to the final results and speak more about it, but I still believe that if he hadn't made that mistake, I think Mario might have just maybe gotten Manny.
Or if he started on the front.
But then
on the front grid, sorry.
But that pipe affected the rest of his race. I mean, closer to the end, he was overtaken by other riders closer to the finish line because he just couldn't manage that mechanical issue.
For those of you that actually aren't aware with what happens to your motorcycle when your header is damaged that bad, it completely destroys the power curve of your motorcycle. We're going up to 2,300 meters plus in elevation, and you need as much power from that motorcycle as possible. And when your header is not connected to the cylinder, it's not a good sign. Your bike is it's a 125, 200 two-stroke.
And then as well, I'm sure you guys saw the state of those tires.
Yes.
By the end of the race. So no traction and down on power at elevation of 2,300 meters. Man, phenomenal. Imagine what he could have done.
Before we get into tire preservation, which is a key point for this race, you guys are forgetting someone.
Graham G-Force Jarvis.
Graham Jarvis was on an absolute charge by the end of that day. He got the final checkpoint win. Yes. So he was the winner of the final checkpoint. He, at 50 years old, was pushing harder than these young guns. And I think give him a couple of checkpoints and you would see a very tight battle between that first position.
And he actually looked the most chilled at the finish line,
True.
right?
Big smile.
Like let's keep going.
Yeah.
He didn't look exhausted at all.
Exactly. And if I didn't clearly see a photo of his rear tire, because tire preservation was a very key point of this race. Their tires were destroyed. But Graham's tire wasn't that bad.
Oh, I
So
didn't
what does that mean?
realize.
He's preserving the tire or the way that he rides? Do you think it was intentional?
I think intentional for sure. And riding style. I think that he's just, he comes from trials background, right? Traction. He knows that feeling of that back wheel grabbing rock. Ooh. He has a lot of tours also inside Turkey. So he does the Jarvis tours, and he's got a base setup in Turkey, so he rides there a lot. He knows what the bike, the tire setup, everything does in these terrains as well. So he has not only the skill but the experience to know that, hey, I need to manage that. I need to make sure that I can get this to the finish line. So yeah, for me, Mario for sure, standout ride, but Jarvis, come on.
And he's the one with the most wins.
Yes.
So he has the most experience winning and on this terrain, right? So he's done it countless times before. It's like muscle memory.
Yeah, completely.
Someone else that I think that we shouldn't forget about, even though he wasn't necessarily a top finisher, was Theodore. Now, during the race, I know that Theodore also had a bit of a mechanical. He dropped his bike on a rock and he couldn't start it, and he lost about 30 minutes trying to figure out what was wrong. And it turns out that there was an issue with the stop button cable, so he had to fix that and then get back into the race. And actually the second last checkpoint, so checkpoint 11, Theodore was actually the fastest rider. So he was clearly pushing as much as he could closer to the end of that race. But I think because of the amount of time that he lost during the race, also just wasn't really able to properly catch up.
And speaking about mechanicals, we saw Billy Bolt having to jump start his motorcycle pretty much at the top of Mount Olympos. You could just see the frustration and just the shock in his face and in his posture when he realizes that his bike is just not starting. The battery, it seemed like the battery was just dead.
Yeah, and you could hear the frustration.
Wow.
I don't think it's a secret. I think everybody saw and heard it. It is all over social media, so I think we can talk about it, but I can completely understand. I mean, coming so close to the end, your first race back, he was exhausted in the end, right? He was absolutely done. Hats off to him for finishing and for actually putting in a phenomenal ride. Also with all of those challenges thrown at him, first race back. But how unlucky that the bike, you could literally see him grab his helmet like this because he looked back and the finish line is right there, right? But the bike is not starting.
Yeah.
Like, what must be running through your head? How are you going to push your bike up there
Not
when
possible.
you're absolutely done?
Yeah, it was really good that he got it going.
Honestly, lucky in a way that he wasn't on that top hill. Because what would he have done? He would have had to have gone back down, started the bike, and then climbed back up. He was very lucky as to where it actually cut out. There
So
was
true.
luckily a road there for him to jump start it, right?
You are so true.
Yes.
That is a gift from God, to be honest.
Can you imagine if you are almost near the top and then it just does?
And
What
you
do
have
you
to
do?
go-
Do you try to push it up the rest of the way, or do you have to go back down to start it and then go back up the hill?
And hopefully not stall going back up again.
Right?
Yeah.
I know, frustrating situation, but actually kind of lucky.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that actually because you're just taking in whatever's happening and somehow he's got a perfect downslope to where you can...
Right?
You raised such a good point.
Yeah.
I
Lucky.
didn't even think of that.
Lucky.
So let's see who are our top finish. What is this race? What
Yeah.
did we finish with?
Okay, so our top finisher is none other than the championship leader, Manuel Lettenbichler. He finishes 13 minutes ahead of second place and noticeably emotional across that finish line. I mean, he wheelies, he gets across there, but instantly tears are rolling. It definitely looked like it was a toll on him. I know, like in his interview, he said it's definitely the toughest race of the season for him. Then in second, we have G-Force Jarvis, the king of Mount Olympos. I mean, what as you said, Chris, coming across that finish line, smiling.
Loving life.
Just, casual, just...
Yeah, I think he also pulled a slow wheelie,
Yep.
put her down and...
Is that it? Is that the end?
That's it.
Yeah, no, oh my God, that guy blows me away. I don't know. I want what he's on because, yeah, he's
And it
amazing.
also looked like when he came across, it's like you saw Manny there and it's like Manny almost wanted to give him a minute to just like catch his breath, but actually then he's like, wait, this guy's actually fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
And then to round off our championship top three, we have the man who came from the second row, Mario Roman. Honestly, what an impressive performance by him. I'm really blown away by, him starting second row, having this serious mechanical, and then coming in third. How impressive.
I don't know if it's something to do with like what they do in Spain with the type of riding that they do there. But yeah, his fellow countryman, Francis Moret, also had a stellar ride inside fifth position, just behind Billy Bolt in fourth.
Yes, you're right. But Billy Bolt comes in fourth after his issues, you could say, and also just laying on the ground, absolutely exhausted. But what a good performance, actually, for someone who hasn't been riding hard enduro for such a long time, and especially for such a demanding race. I mean, they were riding for 5 hours on that day, and apparently in those canyons, it was pretty hot, pretty grueling, so a pretty solid performance from him actually coming in fourth. And as you said, Francis Moret, this was his best result so far in his 2 seasons in the Hard Enduro World Championship. I think a very emotional and rewarding position for him. I know that in his interview, he actually said that in the beginning he kind of like crashed in the rocks a little bit, and that also he believes that absolutely, especially on this main day, the trials riding skills played a very big role. He was straight up clear, yep, the trials riding helped me get through.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for sure with all of them, trials riding. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't surprised to hear his name in fifth. I'm not too familiar with him, but obviously I have heard of him. But outstanding ride. Another one. There were just so many good rides. I think for me, I could not have, with my lack of knowledge of hard enduro and sea to sky, I could not have guessed second and third or fourth or fifth would have been these riders.
Yeah, I'd like to say that Francis is our top placing privateer, but then we just have the old dog Graham, which he's the privateer guy at 50 is our top privateer. But yeah, awesome ride for Francis Moret. You could just see that it was an emotional one for him, and yeah, well deserved. Heading to the next round actually, which is his home country.
So now that we know our top 5, let's speak about the rest of our finishers, because there weren't that many of them actually. So we have from 6th onwards, you have Wade Young, Theodore Kabachev, Matthew Green, Sonny Gogia, and David Cyprian. These are your top 10 finishers. Then we have from 11 to 16, we've got James Moore, Kyle Flanagan, Danila, who is, I think, not part of the Hard Enduro World Championship, Dylan Jones, Radford Chug, Keith Curtis. And that is your top 16, or quite frankly, your only finishers for Sea to Sky.
Yeah, and massive shout out to the South African boys, man. You guys put in a cracker of a ride.
Yeah, hats off to all of them. I would say I am a little bit heart sore and devastated that Wade didn't get the win. I know in his interview afterwards with Peter from Hard Enduro World, who, by the way, I've heard that he's actually a time traveler of the sort or something like that. Guy is everywhere with everyone. Absolutely phenomenal. Shout out to him as well.
Go Peter.
But with Wade's interview with Peter, he said that early on in the day, he actually dinged his fork and it somehow unsettled the front of the bike, and said that he was just fighting the whole day. Unfortunate, and I am so sad that he didn't get onto the box at least, because I was rooting for him and I really want this championship to come down to the final straight of the final round of the final day, you know. And unfortunately, that it looks like that's not going. Never say never, but well done nonetheless to Wade, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, and that pretty much brings the points talk into our episode here, with Manny just extending his lead by, I think it's 17 points, and that's going to be a very tough ask for Wade to try to regain. But speaking about these points, some again notables, Mario Raman just drops Theodore in the points. There were 2 points difference between the two. Now there's only 4 points between him and Wade. So Mario now has the chance to get into second position in the Hard Enduro World Championship. Wade's going into Hispania in Spain, which is the final round, and he has to beat Mario. He has to at least put him, not too many people between him, but then he needs to beat them.
So I think we can guesstimate that Manny will most probably be the championship winner. But now the battle is for second. The battle is now between Wade and Mario, with only 4 points between them. And Mario, with that performance in Sea to Sky, has definitely extended that gap between him and Theo. I mean, there's like a 9-point difference between them now. So really, that's who we're really going to be watching now in this final round, right? In Hispania, it's what is Mario going to do to try to bridge this gap between him and Wade?
Yeah, and I think as well, then another thing is ex-teammates, right?
Yes.
I think Wade definitely wants to prove a point and beat the Sherco boys. I also had someone in our comment section, I think it was today or yesterday, bring up the point of how good Wade's actually been on this gas. And I think that also we need to acknowledge that he's been super consistent. He looks good, fresh as hell. And I'm pretty impressed that he adapted to the bike so well, so quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree. Coming back to Mario, we are now heading to the final round, which is around the corner from his home. Yep. This is a home race for Mario.
Yep.
So we know this is now going to be tough. It's going to be a tough one for Wade. It's going to be a tough one for, I think Manny even, I think Manny's going to even have to watch out to try to keep his undefeated streak.
Yes.
It's going to be difficult at this round.
That is true. For Francis Moret, this is also his home race. And I think with Sichiska, he extended his gap between him and Matthew Green. So there's also going to be a bit of a competition between those two for sixth position. There's only a 2-point difference between Matthew Green and Francis Moret. So again, another battle for sixth.
Speaking of also position changes inside the points, we have David Cyprian moving into 9th position. So there was a tight battle between Radford Chug and David for top 10, which is for sure definitely noteworthy. And now David's just put in a stellar ride and actually moved up in front of Mark Rieber.
Correct.
Inside 9th position.
What a shake-up, actually. Now that we look at the bigger picture, the championships points, what a shake-up. And it's not to say that these guys who they jumped over didn't have a good ride, because Matt had an exceptional ride. He came in 7th or 8th?
Matthew
7th.
Green. Matthew Green came in 8th in this specific race.
Which is still a phenomenal ride, considering everything that took place, all of the riders, the diverse range of riders, and something that I think of when I think of Matt, which is irrelevant to the championship, but I thought was pretty funny. Again, an interview with Peter. Peter said to him, so like at the end of the day 3 at the finish line, you could see everyone was knackered, and Peter's got the interview going with Matt, and he's like, so how are you after today? So he goes, I'm sore, eh? And you? I was like, how classic is that?
Yeah.
Like, you could see he wasn't in the mood to be interviewed, but being the lacquer guy that he is, he just, gave Peter time for an interview, and I had a good chuckle at that. But anyway, back to the championship.
So that brings our episode to an end. And next up, we have the 24MX Hispania Hard Enduro from the 25th to the 27th October in Spain. Make sure you tune in for our pre-race episode to see what the organizers have to say and what our race predictions are heading into the final round of the Hard Enduro World Championship.
And as usual, Taryn, if you guys enjoyed this episode and found value in it, don't forget to subscribe, like it, comment, share it with your other hard enduro riding buddies, because we enjoy doing this and we would love to share this with more people that love riding hard enduro. But until next time,
don't forget to
add gas.
Dun, dun, dun.